Hey everybody, welcome back. It is Laura at Hyperstamper. I have a really beautiful antique junk journal to show you today. The book itself is from 1912, so 113 years old. And I covered it. It didn't have a great cover, so I covered up with some vintage applique linen here, and I wrapped all the way around this beautiful doily. It is also vintage, and I left it as a pocket and put in this beautiful, I'm a big fan of gorgeous antique postcards, and this one is way up there at the top of the list. It's actually a glossy, which meant it probably cost a few pennies extra, and it is early 1900s, probably pre-1910. That is a German printed postcard. They had the best printing at the turn of the century. And then this beautiful vintage brooch. Now, let's pretend that it has no value, because I don't want to hear later that it was worth $10,000 on the Antique Roadshow. So that's just from my antique brooch collection, and it's time to share it with somebody else, and matching ribbon along the front. So that is just a flower that fell out of a book, a pressed flower. I love it when that happens. It's like Easter, finding an Easter egg. This is the original first page of the book. There's the publisher's date there, and that's the first plate of the book. I think that there's another plate in the book as well. An antique transit ticket here, little apple image from a recipe book, from a vintage book, and a beautiful poem down here, The Comforts of Friendship. And all that's mounted on top of this postage stamp collector's page from the 50s, and a nice blank vintage book page there to journal on. And a vintage school book page, 1904 wood carver's page. And I love the images they have of this intricate woodwork. And this here, I'll be very careful, because this in itself is an antique postcard album page. So it's brittle, but I wanted to post this postcard in it. And that also is very early 1900s. And that is a beautiful emerald lake. Look at that. It is so cool. I want to be very careful. There we go. And this is a Lone Ranger page from the 1950s. I just thought it was a beautiful scenery, very colorful for a children's book that era. And then more of that wood carving book. Look at that. Isn't that stunning? And then I have a great 1951 or 53, I forget, sorry, yearbook page from Rochester University. Look at that. Look at these hairdos. I gotta show you this one. Wow. That is pretty cool. I love yearbook pages. They're so funny. And then this is a vintage hand-typed research paper. Got the red up top, 1888. It was probably typed early 1900s. And then we've got a check here from the Bowers Corner Drugstore to the Procter & Gamble Company. And that is from 1954, Philadelphia. And up here, I have a 1925 page from a magazine here. Look at the great advertisements on here. Oh my gosh, they're just, I can't even fit them on. It's just a huge page. Isn't she beautiful? So you can just have lots and lots of fun with that. You can repurpose it or just enjoy it and read about what was going on exactly 100 years ago in the world of advertisement. Wonderful vintage birch page here. We've got the fresh and the red-eyed vireo I had in my yard last summer. We were very excited. I'm not kidding, we really were. Okay, this is from the book English Costume, and I've used these plates and continue to use them a lot. I'm going to run out soon, but it's gone a long way. But just a beautiful cover. I love the scissors. If you're a crafter and a junk journaler, that's a pretty cool thing to have. And of course, you can journal on the back. That's the purpose of that one. A little hidden journaling spot up here. An antique tissue that I found inside of a book behind a photo. Another journaling spot there, and a 1930s Beatrix Potter plate. Isn't that sweet? I just love her work so much. I get a lot of requests to add her in, which I can do when you purchase one of my journals. 1925, just a fun kangaroo, a little goose on the tail there. And I love this angry furniture. My furniture's angry at me, actually. Okay, so I have this 1950s bridge game piece. Kind of fun, you can journal on there. And I made this belly band out of Eaton's Children's Annual spine, which it was the only thing left that I could salvage from that book. And then that is from the 1850s. It's a gambling saloon at Baden. Look at that, it's awesome. Who knew? and more vintage birds, and this gorgeous applique piece here that I turned into a pocket. And inside I have this great 1900 plate, and that is on Athens. And then this is from that book, the little bookmark I just showed you with the fashions of the Middle Ages. I love it. I just love those so much. That's just from a newspaper ad, actually, from the 50s, a stamp collector, stamps wanted page. And this is just a great little vintage piece with antique paper on the back to journal on. Sorry, tuck that back in the right way. Another yearbook page here from the 50s. And this is vintage. I have no idea. I tried to look it up. I have no idea what it is. I actually think it was supposed to be put in the front of a book and you write your name on it, but I can't be sure. But I think it's pretty. It fell out of a book I bought. And that is a vintage hanky. And yes, it is quite stained. It fell in a pot of tea that I was tea dyeing paper with. And I just left it. I quite liked it, but you can use it, cut it up, and just have fun with it. That's from that Beatrix Potter book as well. Fun children's book pages, vintage. Oh, this has whiteout. That makes me laugh so much. Remember, you might not. Do people remember whiteout? Do they use it anymore? Vintage ledger sheet. This is a really cool piece out of the back of a magazine from the 50s or 40s. And this is from a gardening magazine, How to Landscape. And then this is from a vintage craft book on doing paper crafts, and that's how to make a bird. Almost looks like origami, doesn't it? There's the little instructions there. So this is another original plate from this book. Isn't that pretty? All the ladies standing around there, and a vintage music sheet. Wonderful children's book page there. And then, oh, that's a lovely little plate, blank on the back for journaling, about the 1930s. And then this is just a little booklet I made with my cutoffs. Kind of fun. You can journal inside that as well. I love hidden journaling spots rather than it just being out in the open. I love all these little nooks and crannies. For example, you could journal on the back of this old flashcard, math flashcard. This I wouldn't, just because it's so wonderful, but you could do whatever you want with it. You could play with it. It is a Guards Watchman dial from the 1890s that clocked their hours, and a vintage Monopoly piece. And I pulled that from a magazine that I just love the big word sentimental. And this is a beautiful piece on different kinds of feathers, and I love feathers. I often put them in my journals, and this is from the Nature Study book of 1925. Oh my goodness, it just keeps going. Another children's book page, vintage paper. This is a vintage party invitation from the 1970s. So you can repurpose that as well. And that is also more antique tissue that fell out of another antique book I had, just stuffed in the back. And then this is a vintage bird page from the 70s. Birds of North America. Another children's book page there, and just a few little pages of botanicals from a vintage botanical book that you can sort of take apart if you want, or just enjoy. Vintage paper on the back of that vintage piece for journaling, and a Pearl Shop receipt. And I believe that brings us to the end. Yes, lots of blank pages from the original book here. I hope you love it as much as I loved making it. You can find that at hyperstamper.etsy.com, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye for now.